Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It is Thursday, July 7th. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris here. On this episode, we are digging into some big movers among pitchers. We're going to take a look at some notable June to July Stuff Plus risers, taking a look at Eno's pitching model, see who's doing things a bit better now than they were earlier in the season. We'll talk about some big picture movers as well, players that have significantly increased their value on the pitching side compared to where they were back during draft season, and at least one faller that I think is worth talking about, a player we haven't talked a lot about in the first half of the season. Now that we have more information, I think it's worth revisiting what we've seen from him along the way. Maybe a few mailbag questions at the end, but probably none of those today, because I think this conversation, much like the one on Tuesday, is going to run a little bit on the long side. So
us, no,
never, no. We talk way too much. Maybe it's almost like we need to have more episodes, but shorter episodes. That would be the sweet spot.
Would that be a thing that people would like?
If that would make people happy, let us know somehow. Don't send an email though. There's a lot of emails right now. Use Twitter. like the tweet for this podcast. If you don't normally like the tweet, take a moment to like the tweet, and then we'll know, oh, this got way more than 7 likes today. That's all I got. No, I think I've got a good sense for what would make the audience.
We do have the metrics. The metrics tell us that most of y'all fall asleep after 45 minutes.
Right. So maybe we should stop talking for longer than 45 minutes and just have an extra conversation here or there that scratches the itch. But we'll look at the notable movers in Stuff Plus. I used the very Derek way of doing this. I took the June, I think it was June 5th, like the first Stuff Plus number from June, and compared it to the first Stuff Plus number in July, and then put it into a big spreadsheet and found the biggest movers. And the biggest mover among starters appears to be Luis Castillo, with my very sloppy method that could have easily chopped off a starter who is bad but got a little better along the way. But Castillo is interesting because he's one of those guys that I don't usually believe in first half, second half splits or cold weather players and warm weather players, but I don't think it's a total situation to ignore. And Castillo now has this multi-year track record of early season struggles. And I'm curious if there's something in the model and the underlying numbers that you see with Castillo that points to this being more than just the weather getting warmer and velo ticking up and things that we often associate with players who might struggle at the beginning of a season.
Yeah, the weird thing about Castillo is, yes, the weather is up, the weather is warmer, and the fastball is up again. That is probably the biggest part of this, because his fastball Stuff Plus, four-seam fastball Stuff Plus, was in the 80s in April, and in his last outing was 127.
Jeez.
So sometimes 2 ticks, as he's gotten since April, 2+ ticks is a lot. And then what's also interesting is that as the season has gone on, he's used the 4-seam more. So he kind of is like a fundamentally different pitcher at the beginning and end of the season, because he knows that he doesn't have the velo on the 4-seam early, so he doesn't use it as much. Early in the early goings, he's using it 12, 15, 20% of the time. He used it 50% of the time against Atlanta last time out. That's just like, who is this? This is supposed to be a sinker guy. So, I mean, one of the things that we like about Luis Castillo is he's a 4-pitch guy. 4-pitch guy means in any given game or any given part of the season, he can feature one of the different pitches. He can change the how often he uses them or when he uses them, so he can keep players at bay. 4-pitch guy means he can turn the lineup over more, and his third time through the order penalty is lesser because he has 4 pitches, not 3 or 2. So these are all good things. There was a good piece in the pitcher list article about the fact that he uses a 4-seam and a 2-seam. And something we've talked about here is that that's a possible way to maybe even outdo the model or just to throw different looks at batters. Cameron Grove, though, the author of another Stuff Plus model, went out and looked to see if guys who both throw a 4-seam and a 2-seam outdid his model, and he found no evidence of that. So I don't know if we need to just keep scratching at that idea. Maybe it has to be 4-seam and a 2-seam. Like he looked at 4-seam and 2-seam, thrown 10% of the time both, and 20%, blah, 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 and didn't find anything. I wonder if it has to be of a certain quality. Like if you have a good enough quality 4-seam and 2-seam, then you kind of unlock a cheat code. But in any case, Luis Castillo in the warmer months is just fundamentally a different pitcher than he is in the colder months, because as he gets more velo on his 4-seam, he uses it more. So it's kind of a duh thing. Like, oh yeah, it's better with more velo, use it more. But it also just means he's a different guy. I don't know how to make that actionable though. You know, like because it's such a whoa.
Jeez. Well, I guess I'm gonna bring out the
bleep that one. It's just such an obvious. It's such an obvious split, and it's such an obvious thing that happens every year that you're not gonna be able to do anything with it. Like, oh yeah, buy Luis Castillo low in May. Luis Castillo owner is like, yeah, I know what you're doing.
They know because they've seen the pattern before.
What if you I guess here's one thing you could do. You could draft Luis Castillo and treat him as a streamer early.
You think you can dodge those raindrops, though?
Could we have this year? Should we play the start, don't start?
I'm going to guess, and you can pull up the game log.
Okay, Milwaukee at home.
We would have been wrong.
Milwaukee at home. Start, don't start. Don't look at the game log. I'm going to do it. Milwaukee at home. Start, don't start.
This is the very beginning of the season?
Yeah.
I would have used them.
I wouldn't have. Milwaukee at home? It's Cincinnati. Yeah. I'd be more careful. So that's less than 5 innings, 3 earned runs. So that in my treatment, if you're a little bit more conservative, let's say maybe more conservative than you, then you avoided a stinker. At Pittsburgh,
definitely would have used them.
We're both starting. I'm not going to lie. 5 innings, 3 earned. A little bit better of a start, but not much better. At Toronto, no, right?
That would have been a no if I had gone in with a plan of just being careful early in the season. Yeah, so I would have missed that start.
6 innings, 2 earned, 5 strikeouts, 0 walks. That's close to. I'd want that.
It's indoors.
Cubs at home.
Cubs at home. I would have used them this year. I would have used them for sure because the Cubs.
Okay, 5 innings, 2 earned. Not bad. This is funny. So if you're going to be conservative at Boston in April, I think you'd say no.
Based on the weather, that would have been a no.
Right.
Based on the matchup, it would have been a maybe. I still probably would have erred on using him previously. But if in this construct, this would have been a clear sit because it would have been 45, 50 degrees maybe.
Yeah. 6 innings, 10 punchies, no runs, 1 hit.
I think this gets back to even with some reasoning, you're still more likely to miss on these decisions.
I think. Okay, so here's the last play. Just draft Luis Castillo because he's cheaper than he should be, and he's a decent pitcher.
Yeah, and just know that you're going to get more of the quality later than you probably will in April. So, okay, well, I'll avoid the frigid, tough starts, but I'm not going to go overboard. But at Toronto was a tough matchup, but weather-wise, it's indoors. You're not worried about how cold it is on game day. So yeah. I don't know.
The other asterisk for him is just that he might get traded.
Right. Well, here's the thing. You brought it up on the 3-0 show that went up on Thursday. Is Luis Castillo an ace? I think is the way you framed the question. And I think there's a million ways to try and define an ace. But if you go back to 2019, let's go back to the year of the rabbit ball. And let's set the minimum innings pitched at 200. Luis Castillo is 11th in WAR among pitchers.
Wow.
There are no bad pitchers ahead of him. Wheeler, Cole, Scherzer, DeGrom, Bieber, Nola, Morton, Lance Lynn, Corbin Burns, who with innings, of course, would be higher on the list.
It strikes me a little bit more as a Lance Lynn than a Corbin Burns.
Well, of all the pitchers on that top 11, Castillo has the highest walk rate. So he stands out in a bad way there. But he misses
not
bats
a really
the way.
bad walk. Yeah, it's not a bad walk rate.
For the whole time, it's a little high, but it might be a little better right now. He's kind of, I don't know, he kind of looks like Giolito in the peripherals. Giolito with a better home run rate. That's more or less what Luis Castillo has been.
Probably the best starting pitcher on the market. And you get one more year of him after this.
I think the Reds should trade him because I think the demand is going to be very high.
What if he goes to the Yankees, though?
I don't think the Yankees should use long-term trade pieces to trade for a front-line-ish or front-line starting pitcher. I don't think that's addressing their needs correctly.
Who needs it the most? The Twins.
The Twins, yeah.
That would be a net positive for Luis Castillo, I think.
Twins, Cardinals, plenty of teams, but those two, the two teams that come up the most with Frankie Montas, those are the teams that would also make sense to pay the premium for Luis Castillo. And I think in the Twins case, this is why I thought German Marquez made sense for them as kind of a buy low, multiple years of control. This is a problem for more than one season for the Twins. You're going to compete for more than one season, get someone that can help you for more than one season. And we know the Reds are cheap as hell, so getting rid of Castillo for that next year, that nothing makes the Castellinis happier than saving $17 million on a player that was actually really good.
And the Twins seem to really care about like years of control and I think that this might be lining up for the Twins because I think they would be like, oh, we also get them next year,
Cold weather team though. It's colder. It's like the worst cold weather place you can
go. Spicy.
See, look at the problem you've created. If they only put a roof on Target Field back in the day, it would have ruined some of the views.
You know who's really used to pitching in the cold? Montas.
Yeah. He's pitched in a damp basement for years.
Unfortunately hurt. Basement, thank you. I agree.
Is the Oakland Coliseum not like pitching in a damp basement? Have I misread the situation?
No, 100%.
Okay.
It's got flies and
I've never in my life have never actively tried to delay visiting a ballpark before. Like any chance I get to go to a ballpark, I still haven't been. I've lived out here for almost a year, and you go every other week or so at least. You probably go to San Francisco more than you go to Oakland.
I like from a work standpoint, it's well,
they're bad. They're a bad team also.
Yeah.
That's not helping the cause.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll do a day game. We'll go to some matinee in Oakland, and we'll be one of like 2,000 people there because John Fisher, and that's just how it's going to go. But
Saturday day games are pull more like 4,000.
All right. Well, 4,000. So it'll be like the, Fall Stars game, roughly, in terms of crowd size. Fair. Yeah. I'm in on Castillo right now. I think what he's doing right now makes sense to go trade for him in fantasy. I think it makes sense for major league teams to trade for him. I think he can be the best pitcher available.
If you're worried about this Twins cold weather thing, at least that's more of a next year problem.
Yeah, you're not really worried about that for the rest of this season.
Now. Yeah,
maybe those last couple starts at the end of the season could get a little cold, but you're not worried about that. It's not going to be like April up there where it's pretty nasty, even though it's a great ballpark and great place to be. Some other pitching movers behind Castillo in terms of stuff plus
14
risers.
Minutes we talked about one pitcher.
And this is why the show has a problem. We've recognized the problem. Taijuan Walker is a big riser. Up
that one's easy.
6 in stuff plus. 6 points is a lot. So what's the difference with him?
And I had a DM or a tweet or something where someone was asking, this is the Taijuan Walker that falls apart, right? He always falls apart. I think this is a little bit different because what we're seeing is a fundamental pitch mix change. There was, let's see, is that a month this year? There was a month this year, the month of June. Taijuan Walker threw more splitters than four-seamers.
Throw your best pitch. I love it.
Yeah. It's a throw your best pitch thing where he's zeroed in on the slider and the splitter as pitches he wants to 30-30-30. So he throws, right now in July, he's throwing the sinker again a little bit, but mostly he's 30-30-30ing slider, four seams, a splitter. And, I don't know that anybody can command, a splitter really well. So it could be a little bit predictable in that he's using the slider and the four seam for command and the splitter for action. But the good news is the slider is among the best stuff he's ever had. The four seam at 91 stuff plus is not amazing, but he's locating it well, and it's an average pitch. And by splitting the slider and the four seam, he's never as predictable as you can say. And he is putting the splitters in good locations, and it's a really good pitch by Stuff Plus. So I do think this is a different Taijuan Walker. There were other Taijuan Walkers that used these other pitches, the cutter and the sinker and the curveball more, and those are suboptimal pitches. They're all below average pitches, well below average pitches by Stuff Plus. So the fewer curveball, sinkers, and cutters he throws, the better he gets. It's a pretty easy math problem. I'm in on Taijuan Walker. Plus, really nice home park. I don't think the in-division matchups are all that scary, other than maybe Philly in Philly. But even if you skip a couple Phillies in Philly, I think you will get a good schedule out of him too.
At Atlanta in the Heat might be one that'd be a little
that's the other one I was
in more
thinking about.
shallow leagues, but yeah, I think in Citi Field he's probably more likely to be in your lineup than out, unless you're in a really shallow format. I do think the increased splitter usage probably has something to do with the ground ball rate being up, and that on top of the park factors helps explain why the home run rate has improved so much. I'm not sure he's a 0.46 homers per 9 guy going forward. I think that's probably a little bit of good fortune baked in too, but the home run issues we've seen from him going back to the pandemic shortened season, those might not be coming back. That might not be the baseline anymore with this approach. The ability to avoid the most damaging contact seems to have changed with this pitch mix change.
Yeah, and the splitter may not, changeups. We've said the research is that the relationship between changeup, swinging strike rate, and overall strikeout rate is the weakest of all the pitches, and a splitter is when I do work, I count splitters as changeups. It's not maybe that surprising he doesn't have a great strikeout rate. The nice news about him, because I don't also see him as an ace or a 2, and if you're really behind in strikeouts, he's not necessarily the guy you go after. However, if you just need good innings, I think he's attainable, because somebody will be looking at that 7 per 9 strikeout rate and say, well, that's awful, dude. Why do I want, this guy is going to be a pumpkin. The projections all say he's going to be a 4+ ERA guy. I see a guy who's going to be low to mid 3s, I think. Going forward, I believe in this pitch mix. So that's an attainable guy who should be a good pitcher and maybe not give you a ton of strikeouts. So it a little depends on your needs, but also a guy I would buy.
Speaking of attainable, we talked about Jackson Kowar. I think maybe an episode or two ago, you mentioned that his pitch mix had actually changed, with the fastball in particular, right? It's not the same fastball we've seen.
Yeah. What would you prefer? I think of all the changes that are believable and interesting, I think pitch movement is really exciting. However, pitch movement changes happen less often. Like, how often does someone in season just add like 2 inches of ride? That's a season to season thing. That's what you work the whole off season on it. Kowar came back and he added like an inch plus of ride, and his slider is totally different. So, that's kind of amazing to do that in season. It must have been, something about the product of some off-season work. But when it comes to vertical movement, his fastball, since he's come back, has 2 inches more ride plus. And his slider has nice horizontal movement it didn't have before. 4 inches more horizontal movement. So he basically went down and came back up with a riding four-seamer and a sweeper, which is what everybody wants in baseball right now. And it's kind of amazing he did it on the Royals, I have to admit. Now, he just doesn't have good command. So we're not suggesting that he needs to be someone, I would say, that you need to go get in all your leagues. But if you're in a deep dynasty situation, if you're in an AL only, this is a fundamentally different pitcher. And if you look at per appearance numbers, let me give you an idea of his upside since he's gotten back. 105 stuff plus since he's gotten back.
That plays.
Yeah. And even the early numbers on location are not something you want to believe in too much, but even better location. He did it by changing his arm slot, which is another crazy thing to do in season. But there's some differences in the way he's releasing the ball.
I just think it could turn into a thing where you pick him up because there's a good matchup coming up. You're optimistic because of what we're talking about right now. Pitches well. You decide to keep him for another week. Pitches okay again. And he just hangs around your roster longer than expected just because it's been pretty difficult to find bottom of the roster pitching, especially in 15-team mixed leagues. I think that's been an ongoing challenge for a lot of us.
If he's a 2-starter anytime soon, jump on him. I love home matchups. If you're in an AL only where you can bench him and put him in the lineup and bench him, then that's a really good use for it. There are going to be some matchups. Would I throw him in Chicago against the White Sox right now? I don't know. That they seem like they might start getting dangerous. They've been putting up some 8 spots recently, so I don't know if I want to throw Kowar out there for that. But home against most teams, yeah.
Other names that are risers here in Stuff Plus over the past month. Mike Clevinger, not a surprise for a guy that missed all of last season while recovering from Tommy John surgery. I'm kind of curious how his improvement now might dovetail with some other players who've come back from major injuries where it takes maybe a few months before things look the way they did. We talked about Noah Syndergaard on the 3-0 show, and I started to wonder if maybe he's going to hit that phase where the velo could tick up a little bit. Things we saw from him pre-injury, maybe more of that comes back. Do you think we're seeing that right now with Clevinger?
Yeah, it's kind of weird. The progression normally off of Tommy John is that you have your stuff and the command is what takes a little bit. But from Clevinger, we're clearly seeing a 4-seam that started out in the 80s and low 90s that's been above 100 in Stuff Plus for 3 out of his last 4 starts. And we're seeing a curveball that's improving. He doesn't really throw it that often though. But we're seeing the cutter started out at 80 and 60 and 70 and in his last few appearances has been above 100. So I don't know. The slider has been consistently there for him, and that's a really good basis in today's league is to just always have a slider. But to have his other pitches kind of growing to meet it, I think we're seeing also that he's staying in longer. The outings are longer, and he's pushed Nick Martinez basically into a bullpen role. I think Clevinger is back.
Nice to see it, given that pre-injury, we're talking about him as a pretty steady top 15 to top 20 starting pitcher based on strikeout rates and ratios that he was providing around a few injury concerns during his time in Cleveland. Some other interesting names here. Luis Garcia. What is happening in the background?
The cousins.
Wow.
Cousins are being loud again.
Incredible. Luis Garcia among the other risers. Here, I'll just run through the rest of the names on this list that stood out to me. Luis Garcia.
Oh, yeah. We're not going to do 15 minutes each.
No. Luis Garcia, Mitch White, Lucas Giolito.
Which Luis Garcia, though? Are you sure you got the right Luis Garcia?
I'm going to check the IDs momentarily to make sure it didn't match the reliever with the starter and then spit out a big Stuff Plus jump. Sonny Gray. And
dude,
Lucas
Giolito has been improving the stuff underneath the hood. It's weird that the results aren't there yet, but he's gotten the ride back on his 4-seam, and that was what he's working with Ethan Katz. So theoretically, once he has that ride back on his 4-seam, all of his other pitches are going to go up in Stuff Plus too. So I don't know, man. Yes, I can see the same peripheral stats you can, and yes, I'm super nervous about Lucas Giolito, and yes, his velo is down, but I think there's some buy lowness to him.
Does that mean we're buying low with the expectation that he's a good SP2, or are we buying low hoping he comes close to the initial expectations for him this season?
I would like to buy at the level that he's an SP2. That's what the price I'd like to pay, because I think that he can get back to SP2s, and then if everything clicks right, then you can get some SP1 action. That's how I want to buy. And I would say a little bit lower for Trevor Rogers, but a similar situation for Trevor Rogers where he has been pitching better recently. It hasn't totally shown in the numbers, but he has a really nice home park, and I think the underlying numbers are showing that his stuff is increasing a little bit. So I would buy Trevor Rogers as a 3 and maybe hope to get some 2s out of him.
I'm confirming that I matched correctly with Luis Garcia. This is a real spreadsheet problem that people have. You should use IDs when you can't. If you can. If you can't, then you have to just double check with Luis Garcia.
Early in the season, I think we just put all the Luis Garcia stuff together.
Well, and I think something happened where Diego Castillo for the Pirates pitched at some point, because like half the position players in the league have pitched. So then I matched Diego Castillo, the pitcher, or the position player, to the pitcher, and it looked like there was a huge jump. I was like, whoa, Diego Castillo he's going to take over that Mariners bullpen. I was like, wait a minute, hold on. I rewound. I go, oh, there it is. There's the mistake. So errors in spreadsheeting, very real.
Luis Garcia, gives me the same, makes me think about the difference between changing your pitch mix to improve your stuff plus and improve your life versus changing your pitch movement. And while I really liked it for Taijuan Walker, I think there's a little bit more of an asterisk for Luis Garcia, because the way that he's improved his stuff plus is by stopping throwing his four seam. And if you look at his different pitches, the four seam is his worst pitch by stuff. It's okay by location, and overall it's near average, but it's an 89-90 stuff plus pitch, whereas the cutter he's replacing with is 106 stuff plus. So yes, that makes sense in a sort of mathematical way, I guess. But in terms of, I think what happens over the course of the season, the type of fatigue we saw out of him in the past, there is some risk that this comes around and batters start focusing on the cutter, right, and start sitting cutter and start treating the cutter as the foundational pitch, and that there is some risk to doing what he's doing. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, and I'm looking at the home run rate and wondering too, is he a guy that has a home run problem, or is he a guy that's been unlucky with home runs so far? Because that's up again compared to where it was last year, and it was a tick on the high side. I mean, 1.1 homers per nine is not terrible, but 1.63 homers per nine so far this season in an environment that is generally not going to boost homers that much.
And does that have anything to do with going to the cutter over the four seam more? Because you throw maybe the cutter hangs, or maybe a miss with the cutter is more egregious in terms of the locations you're throwing it. Like, for example, even in the model itself, the locations the cutter going to are not as good as the locations the four seamer is going to. So he's chosen to have as a foundational pitch, a pitch that he is more about stuff about action than it is about command. So will that have some ramifications for him? The location plus on the cutter is 98. The location plus on the four seam is 103. So maybe that has something to do with this home run rate. All in all, though, he's a good pitcher, and again, he's got a lot of good pitches, and maybe maybe he can bring the four seam back, or feature another pitch of his. He at least is really good when it comes to slider, cutter, changeup, four seam, 4-pitch guy. Gets good whiffs, looks good by strikeouts minus walks, looks good in the model. This is the faintest of asterisks that it comes from not throwing the four seam as much, and kind of throwing the cutter more. At least with Walker, you've got that 30-30-30 split. Luis Garcia is going to that territory of cutter is the foundational pitch at 40, and everything else is down around 20.
Yeah. What's really impressive with Garcia too, though, is when he kind of first emerged in 2019, probably at high A is when people started to really notice him. He had 108 Ks and 65 and 2/3 innings. He had a 12.4% walk rate that year. Walk rate has come down every single season. Aside from making the leap from high A to the big leagues in the pandemic shortened year, he's improved his walk rate each season he's been in the big leagues. So, I mean, this is a really high floor pitcher, another mark on Houston for just great pitching development. Obviously a guy that has good stuff and is putting in the work to get to that level as well. But are we talking about him in the same breath that we're talking about Mike Clevinger? I mean, if it's a would you rather toss up for the rest of the season?
I'm taking Luis Garcia.
Yeah, I think with Garcia, just because there's less of an injury concern too. I think with Clevinger, there's that.
Clevinger's hurt all
flag.
sorts of things, not even just the arm.
Mm-hmm. So we're probably looking at Garcia as what, a top 20 starting pitcher rest of season, given the team context.
Where did I have him before? Probably too low. Yeah, man, I had him too low.
He was low for me coming into the season, and I liked him because of the fade at the end of the season. I think I put a little too much weight onto that as I was trying to figure out what to make.
Also, in the model, he didn't look as good because he's had a really great month by the model by changing his pitch mix. So in the model, he was 100 stuff plus 98 location back in the day.
He'd be among the big pitching movers, and I think it's a perfect transition to what I wanted to talk about for the other part of this show. I think Sandy Alcántara is getting the league-wide, Twitter-wide sort of appreciation that he's probably deserved going back to the early parts of last season. And I think if you were trying to adjust where pitchers were going to go for a second half draft or for 2023, among higher end pitchers, he'd be one of the biggest movers. It wasn't like he was cheap this draft season, but he's up in value. I mean, he's probably, we talked about some guys coming down because of injury. Walker Buehler comes down. We're going to talk about Shane Bieber in a few minutes.
I would have him exactly where I had him preseason.
I think he's at least, well, you may have just had him
I had
the right
him.
spot. The market was a little bit lower on Sandy Alcántara, and I think I was kind of in line with the market.
I had him around 12, and I would have him around 12. I still think that the guys who strike more guys out are preferable.
So, but Sandy versus Nola was a toss-up on draft day. I assume you had Nola ahead, or you had Alcántara ahead the whole time?
I did. I have Nola ahead now because of the strikeout rate. Plus, Nola seems like he's in one of his good command years. And his stuff. I think Nola has more strikeouts. I'd rather have the strikeouts.
I wonder if starting pitching is going to get squeezed up. We were wondering if maybe the first round would only have 2 starters instead of the usual 3. I think it's probably 3. I think McClanahan creeps into that spot because I think it's Burns, Cole, and McClanahan for people. It's some order at the top. Maybe we see a few more pitchers get jammed into round 2 and early round 3, and that's the difference. Whereas in this past draft season, that pick 45 range is where Alcántara was going a lot. Maybe it's more like pick 30, pick 35. Maybe he creeps up 10 to 15 spots on the overall list for people.
I think it'll be an interesting place for me to shop. I like the 3rd round because I get those 2 bats, and I think even next year I'll still be shopping the same place I shopped in the 3rd round this year. I got lucky with the Wheeler, but I think, given the shape of Wheeler's season, we may see Wheeler in the 3rd round. And I think you'll have first round pitchers will be Cole, Burns, and McClanahan. Yeah. I think second round pitchers will be Gossman, Nola,
Woodruff
Ohtani.
can still pretty much. I mean, Ohtani. I think Ohtani's still a first
rounder I don't know what to do with him. Okay, so first round bat
breaks
pitcher
everything
guy. Yeah. Second round. I see Nola, Woodruff, Rodon, DeGrom.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, if DeGrom, I think you and I both know if DeGrom comes back from this injury
and shoves
is fine
for
the rest of the season, he's good. Rest of the second half,
he's going to get Healy playoffs next year.
He's a first rounder again. I think healthy for a half season round pushes him all the way back to the first round in the NFBC at least. I don't know if it does that for everybody in other formats, but I think with that overall component, I think that would push him back into the fringe.
Well, now we have
10.
35 players in the first round. Thank you.
Stop playing snake drafts. That's what this conversation has brought me back to. It's like, wait a minute, why are we doing this way? This is a stupid way to make rosters.
So who are third round pitchers? Third round pitchers are old guys that had good seasons. So
Verlander, a third round pitcher?
Yeah, I think so. Verlander. Wheeler is borderline second, third. Scherzer.
Yeah, I'm going to live in the third round.
Third. I think maybe third. He's older. He's going to be older. He had some injuries again this year. And then there's Sandy and Dylan Cease and maybe like Musgrove.
So some guys that maybe haven't ever been higher before, like Musgrove. Control issues. I still would love to shop in the Cease Alcántara. Like if you're gonna be a choice of Cease, Alcántara, and Scherzer in the third round, I think I'm just gonna take a third round pitcher. I think Manoah's going to get jammed up in that area
Manoah's
as well.
There too. So, and I think I'll probably take the young guys. So I think it'll be Alcántara, Cease, or Manoah for me. I don't see a problem with that. Those guys are aces, right? I think I might still take Manoah or Cease over Alcántara because of the strikeouts. So.
We had a question about Alcántara from one of our listeners. John wanted to know, should we be concerned about Sandy sitting too close to his max given the workload volume? I thought it was a fair question worth bringing up. So as someone who's all in on Sandy, how do you feel about that?
How close is he to his max? I got to pull that up.
Yeah, how often, I guess, is he sitting there? That's the challenge.
Velo. This year he is sitting. His max is 101, and he's sitting 99. That is a little spicy. It hasn't been doing it all season. Early on, he was 96.5, 97.5. Now he's at 99 out of 100, dude. That is super close to his maximum. That is super close. The league used to be at like 3, and in the postseason it was like a 2 in terms of difference between max and sitting, and then it moved towards where the postseason is. So the league is more around 2, and so 1 is being aggressive even in an aggressive league. That is, and he's had some injuries before. But he's also, I mean, look at this, 200 innings basically in 2019, 205 last year, 26 years old in his prime. I think it might be more of a thing to worry about long-term than it is thing to worry about this year.
Yeah, I think in this particular instance, John's in a keeper league and Alcántara is his ace, but at the same time, what's the actionable move here? If you're doing well in the league this year, you're not trading him away. If you're playing for 2 years from now, maybe you're cashing in right now because you're maxing out on value, which you would do with almost any pitcher in this circumstances. This is not even about the max velo thing. This is about the timing of moving your aces if your team's not competing.
Yeah. Yeah, and there are some really fun young pitchers that you might be able to get. Like you might be able to get like a Strider and somebody like who would it take? Like what if you get Strider? Could you get Strider and Baz for Alcántara right now? No, that's too much.
Probably not.
Strider. How about Strider and
can you get a
Ashby?
buy low hitter? Could you do Strider and a buy low bat? Like
I would actually want to do that because I would want to get a bat out of it.
Eloy or something.
Yeah, I would want to get a bat out of it. That's my whole move in Dynasty is to trade pitching for hitting and just try to always be improving the hitting and picking up pitching along the way. So that's I would take Strider and Eloy for Sandy right now. Yeah, in a Dynasty if it wasn't competing this year.
So a slight concern given that he is very close to that max on a pretty regular basis. I'm starting to get some Luis Severino vibes from Sandy just because he's got that very team friendly contract. So at this point, like he's just going to air it out because he got the guaranteed money. So there's not a big free agency payday around the corner to sit back for. So why not just do what you can do? But Severino, it was another one of those guys that I thought was always kind of close to his max. He eventually blew out, missed almost 2 full seasons with the injuries, looks really good again right now. 94 Ks and 84 innings. It's close to what we saw pre-injury just in terms of strikeout percentage and walk percentage. The ratios are really good. Obviously, the team is great. So you get run support, you get bullpen help. Like everything you could possibly want from Luis Severino is there. I just wonder how much can we move him up now that he's healthy again? Is he all the way back to pre-injury Luis Severino, or is he always slightly discounted from those levels because the risk of another injury is higher as a result of the recent significant ones?
One thing that I like out of the Luis Severino situation is, don't buy the guy in his first season back from an injury. Wait till he's pitched and buy him the next season. I think Severino and Syndergaard are the most extreme versions of that, right? Where they pitched once or twice.
Well, four relief appearances for Severino, 6 innings, but like basically one start but scattered over 4 appearances.
And both of those guys had reasons why you couldn't even necessarily trust the stuff model, right? Because Syndergaard didn't throw his breaking balls at all, so we just didn't even know what the state of his breaking balls were. And Severino was coming out there in relief stint, so you couldn't tell, like, is this going to port over to starting, or is this who he is now? Is he basically a reliever? That I think that was an open question because we're talking about a guy who's coming off of major problems. But in either case, if you want to make kind of a general rule where you don't buy the guy in his first year back off the surgery and you buy him the next year, I think it serves you pretty well. So don't wait for Glasnow to pitch. Like, you wouldn't want to draft Glasnow this year, but you hope that Glasnow pitches some this year and you draft Glasnow next year. That sort of deal.
But yeah, so the difference for you is if you see Glasnow for 5 to 10 innings even in September, you're more likely to take that chance on him going into 2023 than if he doesn't get back and show up in a game and we're seeing it for the first time in April.
A major league team, a medical team said it was okay. Like some doctor signed off on it, and a team put him out there. That's like a major hurdle. There are other players that get close to that hurdle and then have setbacks.
Yeah, that's just tough because for Glasnow, his surgery was in August, and he could be on a pretty normal recovery timeline and still just not quite be cleared to pitch in games again. Like when you had surgery, when you got hurt, has pretty significant bearing on when exactly you're able to come back. So he's right on that borderline where we could see him this year. I think it's more likely that we don't than we do, just based on 14 months being a little more of the guide than the.
And I know that, I understand the randomness of the calendar in this situation, right? Like I understand that everything could be fine and you could have a good next year. I would be less likely to draft Tyler Glasnow if he doesn't pitch this year, and even if it's just random. I want to see him now. Maybe if he comes out in the spring and looks totally fine before I draft.
98 in the spring and
throwing all his pitches, throwing all his pitches, because he brought that slider. He really developed that slider, right? So if he's throwing 3 pitches in the spring again and he's throwing 98, maybe I'm on board. I still want the reduced price. I just still wouldn't want to pay a high price because we just haven't seen. He hasn't been cleared to throw in a major league game.
The fights about Tyler Glasnow and durability and projected innings that people are going to have on Twitter and on podcasts in February and March are going to be
breathe it all in.
Noxious. Just hold your nose, just cover,
just bathe in it.
Or just mute Tyler Glasnow as a term on Twitter. I mean, you need the updates, so you have to find a way to get those updates. But just to get out of the debates,
I'm buying Severino. Like if I can get Severino right now in dynasty leagues, much more bigger asterisks. I don't know. We've got 100 innings over 3 seasons now, and 84 of them this year. So there's still kind of an open question there. But for this season, if you can get him because the other person is worried about injuries, then go for it because you only live once.
I think he's a top 20 starting pitcher the rest of the way. And if we could erase more injury concerns, he might even be higher than that. That's sort of baking in added risk that comes with a player who's gone through what he's gone through. Let's talk about Kyle Wright. I think we talked about him a lot in April. I'm curious where things stand with him now that we're a half season in. He, to me, is a classic example where at the beginning of the year, you could just see he's not the same pitcher that he was when last season ended. So it was easy to look at him as a massive early season riser. Where does he settle in right now? Like I forgot to pop open your rankings before we started. How much of a leap did he have at that last set of rankings compared to the bottom of the list or near bottom of the list status that he had for a lot of people back in March?
Yeah, the model really loved him, and so I bumped him. I don't know if I bumped him enough. I bumped him up to 50, and the reason why, I mean, 40 in the 49, and with injury, he'd already be in the sort of 45 range. But the reason I didn't bump him further, and this is the difficulty with the model, is that he alternates good starts with bad starts with locations. His command is like that little hair up your nose, where it's just, it's there and then it's gone, and it's so annoying to me because the stuff has been absolutely different, and I would totally bet on him just based on stuff. But like literally goes from 108 location plus in his first start to 99 in his second, 110 in his third start, 92 in his fourth, 103. 96, 101, 91, 101, 99, 109, 89. You know what I mean? It's just like literally every other start. And it's the last thing holding him back because the new mix that he's got is really excellent. I think maybe I had him a little bit too low. And I think he's more of a top 30 pitcher now. Because even with those little blow ups, he's been excellent overall. And I believe the new swing strike rate, believe the new strikeout rate, and even if he regresses to the projected walk rate, he's going to have better strikeouts than the projection systems have. And I think at least sort of a 3-5 guy going forward.
All right, so a viable SP2 in a 15-team league, probably a nice 3 if you're playing at something a little bit smaller. One other big mover, another Astro, Framber Valdez. Going back to the projections we saw for him at the beginning of the season, he was projected by the Bat to have a 3.77 ERA and a 1.34 WHIP and 153 Ks and 173 innings. And I think I definitely took that to heart because I care about projections. I think the Bat is a great projection system. And I thought, okay, yeah, the pass control issues I think are worth being mindful of. And maybe he doesn't miss quite as many bats as we'd like guys to miss. So I was kind of out at the price on Valdez. Mm-hmm. And when I watch him, the more I watch him, the more I like him. And the projections have also moved quite a bit. He's now projected for rest of season numbers from the Bat at 3.34 for the ERA, so almost a half run improvement, a 128 WHIP, and 89 Ks in 95 innings. So a lot more in terms of strikeout rate. We know Framber is a ground ball machine. Now he looks kind of like another Dallas Keuchel for them from a development standpoint, someone that comes out of relative nowhere to possibly spin multiple sub-3 ERA seasons. Like I think I've just gone from skeptic to believer to the point where I might even like him a tick more than the projections do, especially with the WHIP. I think that WHIP comes in a little high for me at 1.28 the rest of the way. I think he's probably under that.
It's possible he's the new Dallas Keuchel in that he is really great at 93, 94, and there's some sort of velocity shelf for him. We saw how badly Dallas Keuchel fell off. So I'm maybe lesser of a dynasty asset than a win now asset. As that velo starts to go down, we may see this sort of fall apart. But the other stuff that I like is I did a piece on underused pitches, and Framber's cutter was on there, or slider, whatever you want to call it. So he's got a new pitch this year, and the changeup still rates well in the model. So he could be a 4-pitch pitcher. It's just that his curveball is dominant, and his sinker just has one of the lowest, I think it might be the lowest launch angle on balls in play. So he's got a pitch that kills all power in the sinker. And then he's got this curveball that's an excellent weapon that he has multiple shapes on that he feels really comfortable placing wherever he wants and has just excellent shape. Like Max Fried, right? Like big old curveball, not super fast, but just has a shape that is very difficult on people. So Framber, sinker, Max Friedian, curveball. I buy. I think he's a really good pitcher. He's not going to get you a bunch of strikeouts, but if we are going to like Sandy Alcántara, then we should like Framber Valdez.
Yeah, and I think Valdez, because of the way he works, the volume might help offset the K rate a little bit. Easier to ding him for the rate not being that high, but if he ends up being higher end on workload year over year, then that makes up for it. And I think that I probably underrated that a little bit about Valdez too when trying to figure out what his true ceiling was. One more name to throw at you.
22nd in strikeouts this year, despite the below average strikeout rate.
Yeah, it's a volume game. I mean, most leagues are using Ks, not K by 9. So I want to throw Joe Ryan into the conversation again because the projections are still skeptical. We know it's just different, right? Rest of season ERA 4.23 is the projection of the bat, and he's got a 3.09 so far. He might have some room to bring down the walk rate. I think that's one of the core skills that could still be a tick better than it's been so far. What do you make now that we've seen about a half season's worth of starts from Ryan against big league hitters?
The model does capture things like interesting release points and vertical attack angle, the things that make Joe Ryan a good pitcher other than his command. His command in the model is good. Like the model should be capturing who he is, and it says he's about a league average pitcher. So I think I agree with the projections, man. And he's such a unique look that it doesn't surprise me too much that the home run rate is rising as people are starting to see him more.
Yeah,
let's see who's seen him.
A lot of fly balls.
Let's see who's seen him twice. Seattle saw him once and had at the beginning of the season, 4 innings, 2 earned runs, 4 strikeouts. The second time Seattle saw him, 4 innings, 4 earned runs, 3 strikeouts. Who else has seen him twice? Nobody else has seen him twice.
Orioles
Cleveland
seen him twice this year.
Cleveland has seen him twice. In the second outing, 3 earned runs. First outing, 1 run, 1 earned run.
Still 7 Ks, 1 walk though in that second outing against the Guardians.
That's true. Baltimore, in the second time they saw him, it's a tough offense, though, man. I don't know how much I'm learning from that. We'll see. Cleveland's probably going to see him again, and I would be really interested to see what happens when Cleveland sees him a third time. And then also the scouting report is going out there, and then lastly, the way that people train is to the better teams when they're hitting they're training their hitters is to kind of over exaggerate the qualities of the pitcher they're going to see that night and make the machine do basically what the pitcher's going to do times 10%, like with an extra 10%. So whatever Joe Ryan does plus 10%, so that they're overtrained. They think Joe Ryan is easy when they see him. So the longer that he's in the big leagues, the more that people can say, okay, this is how we want to calibrate the pitching machine to get ready for him. So I don't know. I remain skeptical. I understand vertical attack angle. I understand that he has a low release point and that he throws high in the zone and that his fastball has a flat approach, and that is hard for some people to match up. But I also understand that the league's hitters have seen a lot of 4 seams high in the zone over the last few years, and they've started to train for it, and there are adjustments for it, and there are players that are all over it. Taylor Ward fashioned his whole approach based on that. Marcus Semien hit 45 homers because he figured out how to hit high 4-seamers. So I don't think the high 4-seam, low vertical attack angle thing is like a cheat code anymore. I think everyone knows about it and everyone's trying to do something about it. Either it's lay off all those high 4-seamers completely or develop some sort of swing that you can hit them.
So my reason for including Ryan here is that I expect the market to move him up quite a bit based on what he's done so far. Is he the kind of guy you're very skeptical of? It kind of sounds like, yeah, if we're talking about Joe Ryan and the ADP creeps up into maybe Chris Bassett range. Chris Bassett had a 117 ADP. He was the 40th pitcher off the board if you look at April NFBC ADP. I could see Joe Ryan maybe topping out there if the second half is mostly as good as the first half. I assume you'd be out at that price because there are other pitchers that you just like better that tend to be available in that range.
I have a possible would you rather that might end up there depending on how the rest of the season goes. Ronzi Contreras.
Ooh.
I would take Contreras. Just has a fundamental grouping of pitchings that I like better. Has a lot of really good pitchers, high stuff pitches, more velo, a lot of different looks. It's not all like, oh, my fastball is kind of deceptive.
My gut reaction was to take Ryan, but obviously we get a lot more information before we have to make.
I might
decision.
also get a round or two on Contreras. You know what I mean?
Totally possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that speaks to there are other guys that go around that range that are still available. You just rather have. You feel better about their chances of coming close in terms of what they will do and maybe even significantly exceeding Ryan's ceiling.
I probably won't pay the tax on Joe Ryan.
Yeah, that's kind of where my head is at too, because I think that Bassett price might be the indicator based on what we've seen so far.
I mean, it's a very high fly ball rate, and it's not the best strikeout rate, right? So you could even use more, like we're 70 innings in. You can use K minus BB. A 22 minus 7 K minus BB is not elite.
Yeah, 15 is pretty like average for starting pitchers 14, that we care about.
I think average is 14.
Yeah.
So average for fantasy, yeah. I mean, yeah, but like how much do the bottom, 20, 30 pitchers matter to you in fantasy? You don't want to touch them.
Yeah, maybe Joe Ryan's the next Ian Anderson. Maybe that's where my mind's going. Like the guy that people slowly get into, and then the correction is harsh. Sorry, Twins
better
fans.
Command from Ryan, I think, but not a bad comp. Not a bad comp.
One last question before we go. What's up with Shane Bieber? He's kind of on the faller side of this conversation, which probably is its own episode down the road. Season fastball velo is down. Ks are down. Control is good. Not a surprise given who Shane Bieber has revealed himself to be. Home run rate is good, at least so far. Is he destined for the SP2 cluster, somewhere in that 20 to 30 range among starting pitchers? Again, just
wait a second.
Just to rewind it back to some names that were in that group this year. That's where Joe Musgrove was going this year. That's where Gossman was going this year. That's where Barrios was going this year. And things have turned out kind of poorly for him so far. So what do you think is going on with Bieber?
Thank you for putting a hole in my balloon there with the Barrios mention, because
you can miss I
was about to do a little bit of dancing on the grave. My pitcher rankings, which I for some reason can't find when they came out, but I'll do it in a second. Here it is, June 9th. Oh, this is too good. June 9th, I came out with some pitcher rankings, and one of the comments was, are you going to address your Shane Bieber ranking? You couldn't be more wrong.
Do you even watch the players? Does the author of this list even understand baseball?
No, yeah.
Sometimes that happens.
A lot of that stuff that was unsaid, but I just love this idea that like I have to address every time I'm wrong. On the show, people know that I celebrate my wrongness often and do dissect when I'm wrong. For Shane Bieber, I had awful stuff numbers and the worst of his career, and related to things we can all see, the fastball velo being down, being one of the biggest drivers of it. But I didn't see him as an elite guy. I never had him much higher than 20. And so at that point, he was correct to say that I couldn't be more wrong. But I said basically at the time, listen, my model says what it says, and I'm sticking with it. And I think that he's going to become more hittable as the ball flies better and as we get into these warmer months. Since that ranking, Shane Bieber has a 4.55 ERA. Couldn't be more wrong.
So happy for you right now.
He does have a decent strikeout minus walk rate. He always has during the season. He's a good pitcher. I'm not excited. I might sound excited. I just sometimes get excited because, we get these comments and reactions on Twitter and it gets exhausting sometimes, but a 91 mile an hour fastball velo does not say Shane Bieber is who he used to be. So I'm going to stick by what the numbers tell me. And I'm going to take the over on all his projected ERAs, save maybe the bats. So if you want to know where I do land, 3.76 ERA, 121 whip.
It's not bad. That's not a bad pitcher. It's
still probably top 30. I mean, who was the guy that we just put into the top 30? Kyle Wright? Who would you rather?
Wright? Barely.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Barely. I mean, it's more just because I still have injury risk concerns about Bieber. That's probably the difference for me. I don't think his injury is completely behind him. I think that drop in velo is very problematic. So if you can get some velo back this offseason, maybe Bieber becomes the clear option for me.
It's a little bit interesting that his three of his 4 highest velo outings have been recently, but he's still not cracking 92.
Yeah, and he's got a lot of things he does well.
Good command, great breaking balls.
Yeah,
sorry.
I think it's time for you to check on the people in your home to make sure.
Oh my God, they're going to
well.
Great America, so it's like this. Like I could graph it for you: the tension, and then the apprehension, and the excitement.
Sure, it's
through the roof.
I saw some news item that it's closing soon, the Great America in California and the Bay Area. And then I clicked on it and read it and said within 13 years, I think is what the timetable was. And it was like,
Don't you sometimes hate headlines, dude?
Soon. Right. Yeah. Within 13 years.
Let's go.
Yes.
Better go now.
Really worried about 2035 right now because, things 13 have gone
years,
so
my kids
well.
will have aged out of going to those things anyway.
Your kids could own the park by then and keep it open. It's possible. Anyway, if you got questions for a future episode, send those our way. Eno is at Eno Saris on Twitter. I'm at Derek Van Riper. Best way to get an email in, ratesandbarrels@theathletic.com. Even though there are a ton of emails right now, keep sending them. We'll get to them eventually. It's nice to have those. You can also leave a comment on this video on YouTube. Be sure to hit the like button if you're watching us on YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you haven't done so already, take a moment, leave us a nice rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We really appreciate everybody who has done that. If you'd like a subscription to The Athletic, it's $1 a month for the first 6 months at theathletic.com/ratesandbarrels. Just a hunch that deal probably is going away somewhat soon. So get on that if that is something that you're interested in. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We are back with you on Monday.
Thanks for listening.